G'day guys, and welcome to another YouTube lesson. Today we're going to take a look at the third for our school business function, and that is operations. Most schools tend to start with that, but for whatever reason this is our third business functions, and that's operations. I'm going to be going through and having a look at the syllabus and talking about the different bits and pieces you need to make sure that you know from that syllabus. As always, your syllabus is like the Bible. It's what you need to be able to make sure you yourself can tick off in your mind, make sure you understand what that dot point means, and also understand some case studies and some statistics for each of those dot points. If you don't get anything, don't just go, she'll be right, because it won't be. Come and see me, ask questions on Slack, and we'll make sure you understand it. Okay, now there are two parts to the syllabus that I really need you to focus on. The first part of these are the students learn to, and the second part are students learn about. Now, when I teach you the content, I directly teach you about the students learn about, and in doing so, you should be able to learn to do the other aspect of the syllabus. That's why it's called students learn to. Now, that being said, there have been questions in the HSC that are verbatim, word for word, from the students learn to. So I've made sure in your booklets that they have each of those questions answered as well. Now, in terms of the students learn to, there are 8 parts or 8 different dot points you need to make sure that you can do for the end of your booklets. The first dot point you need to address is to discuss the balance between cost and quality in operations strategy. So look at that balancing between the cost and the quality. From those performance objectives, it's hard to get both, but you want to make sure you get some aspect of both, and that depends on whether you're a good service differentiator or whatever you may well be, or a cost leadership business, but you've got to balance that. It's hard to get both. The second dot point from the students learn to is to examine the impact of globalization on operation strategies. So understand what influence, what impact globalization has on the operations business function and how it can be used effectively as a strategy. Now, the next syllabus dot point is to identify the breadth. That's how deep, to identify the breadth of government policies that affect operations management. So look at those policies and how they affect, impact, influence operations management. The fourth dot point, 1, 2, 3, 4, to explain why corporate social responsibility, CSR, is a key concern in operations management and in every business function these days. CSR, also the extension there, the triple bottom line, profit, social responsibility, and environmental responsibility. They're all very important in terms of a business and it's succeeding, and operations must adapt to be able to take that on board. Now, the next students learn to dot point is to describe the features of operations management for a business in a tertiary industry. Remember, tertiary industries are the ones that's involved in services. So the fine service that I'm providing you now, that's part of the tertiary industry. Whether it be a domestic-based service job like cleaning, or whether it be being in finance or being a lawyer or a doctor, all those services that are provided are in the tertiary industry. So describe the features. What do you see in a tertiary industry, as opposed to a primary and secondary industry, which we looked at in year 11. We're talking about farming, mining for primary. Secondary, we're talking about manufacturing, the tangible products you're making. For a tertiary industry, it's those intangibles, those things you cannot touch. All right, the third last dot point for students learn to is to assess the relationship between operations and the other key business functions in 2 actual businesses. So you'd here need 2 case studies. Qantas, for us, Art of Gelato, McDonald's, whole range that are out there, Apple and so on. You need to look at the relationship between operations and and finance, operations and marketing, operations, what's the other one? Gives me time to think of it too. HR, okay? How that relationship, that interdependence works. And you can start to see that at least students learn to really do draw largely on your knowledge and the students learn about. All right, explain how operations strategy can help a business sustain its competitive advantage. And I want you to use here the performance objective criteria that you see in the strategies. The last one for the students learn to is to recommend, you tell me why, and justify. Recommend possible operation strategies for one hypothetical business. And here's the dilemma a little bit. It only says one. Always try and use lots of different case studies, generally when writing your essays. You can do one, great. But if it actually says one, then only do one. And it's very rare. But if you get that question and it says one, well, you can only use one. If you're really desperate and you can't do anything on just one, well, you won't get top marks, but use a few, I suppose. All right, now I said there were two parts to the operation syllabus that Bibled what we need to know. The first one was the students learn to, and this is directly the content I explicitly teach to you, and it's now the students learn about. The first part, and as always, there's 4 parts of the syllabus in terms of students learn about, except for HR, which has that 5th part, the effectiveness. The rest should also have a 5th part, but people making the syllabus don't know what they were thinking. But this one has the 4 parts. That's the role of operations, the influences of operations, what things impact operations, the processes, the set of steps that an operation manager goes through in performing their duty. And the last part of the students learn about is, as always, the strategies. What strategies can an operations manager put in place to improve the operational performance business function? Now, role of operations has 3 parts. They're the strategic, the long-term role of operations management, and you can have a cost leadership focus, which is to have as cheap a possible product that still works generally as you can, or to take another strategic approach, which is to be a good or service differentiator. Something like Apple. They're not cheap, but they do provide lots of other functions, lots of other benefits that differentiate themselves from their competitors. The second part of operations, or the role of operations management, is goods and or services in different industry. Remember, there are 3 main industries: primary, secondary, tertiary. We'll get into tertiary later. It's divided into 2 other parts from the Year 11 course. All right, but there's also lots of different industries in terms of education, what I'm providing for you now. There's health, there's mining, there's farming, there's electronics, engineering. So we take a look at some of those different industry sectors. And the last part of role of operations management is the interdependence with other key business functions. And we saw that type of dot point in a student's learn to earlier. We'll see some of these connections. And this is how operations is reliant upon, and vice versa, with the other 3 business functions: finance, marketing, and HR. And they do need each other to have a successful business. You can't have one without the other, as the saying goes. Right, the second part of the students learn about operations syllabus are the influences, the impacts, the effects that they have on a business, positive and or negative. Often it's both. If you can talk about both aspects, that's good. And here you've got to define what globalization is, what government policies are, etc., etc. But you've also got to be able to tell the HSC marker, how it does impact upon a business, and use statistics, case studies to back that up. So the first influence is globalization. You have technology, quality expectation, cost-based competition, Woolies and how they're impacted upon by Coles and so on, government policies, legal regulations are also an influence, and environmental sustainability, how it impacts upon a business, and all of these things in particular, I want you to tell me about how it impacts upon operations. You also have another influence of CSR, a corporate social responsibility, a triple bottom line that I mentioned in the Students Learn too. Okay, and we've got to look at the difference between legal compliance and ethical responsibility. Also take a look at environmental sustainability, and this environmental sustainability is very, very topical at the moment and will continue to be so, and social responsibility. All of these are aspects of CSR. All right, the third subpart or subtopic of the Students Learn About for operations are the processes, the set of steps that an operations manager will go through in their day-to-day job. You have inputs. Now remember when I tried to get you to pick business studies and I flogged fairy bread to you, and some of you bullheads chose it solely based on that. Not a smart move. Well, here's your fairy bread for you now. Now, in terms of inputs, we have those two different types of inputs. We put together the fairy bread. We have the transformed resources. That's with an ED, transformed ED. Your materials, information, and customers. And you have the agents of change. They manipulate, they alter, they add to the transformed resources. And these are called transforming resources with the ING, transforming resources. And they are human resources, HR, and facilities. And funny enough, this is a direct example of that interdependence. This HR here is actually written in the operations syllabus, vital. And how workers, HR, have facilities, capital, machinery, and buildings, equipment, how they can manipulate and change the materials, information, customers. Then you have the process occurring inside it with these inputs where you have the value chain and value adding, and we'll get into that when I teach it to you. We look at the 4 V's, not the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4 V's. That's volume, the amount of something that's made, lots or not much, the variety, the different amount of products that you offer, or the customization of those, the variation in demand, how demand varies in terms of a seasonal product like surfboard shop, ice cream shop, and so on, and visibility, which is customer contact. All of these are big parts of the transformation process. We also look at sequencing and scheduling. There's 2 main ways that business and entrepreneurs, business owners and entrepreneurs use to be able to schedule and sequence effectively, and that is through Gantt charts and the use of critical path analysis, CPA. And we'll get into that in future lessons. We take a look at technology and the role of operations and the transformation process, task design, and process layout. And process layout, it's a little bit misleading because there's 3 parts to process layout, one of those being process layout itself. But we'll get to that soon. We also look at monitoring, controlling, and improvement. And the final part of processes of operations are outputs, not surprisingly. Now it's a bit, you use the word stupid, but it's done. We've got customer service as an output. We've got warranties as an output. Businesses produce a freaking product. So again, I didn't make the syllabus. I'd change things if I could, and I think lots of teachers would. But we know that customer service is an output you need to talk about, and it is very important. All right, without good customer service, even if it's a manufactured item, like say this ring, this shirt, you're less likely to purchase the product in future or purchase it in the first instance, even if it's a tangible physical item. Customer service is important these days. And warranties and extended warranties, implied conditions. These are things that legally and additional aspects with extended warranties that you can purchase. These are also outputs. But on top of that, even though the syllabus doesn't say it, I still want you to talk about the actual good or service, or good and service that's being produced. Now we're almost there. Always talk too much? Nah, yeah. Strategies is the last part we look at with operations. Now, like I've said with all the other business functions, when you get an evaluate question or assess question, I need you to be able to have a criteria that you use to be able to evaluate how good or bad a business is traveling. For operations, we use performance objectives of quality, speed, dependability, flexibility, customization, and cost. If a business has a much better quality product than its competitor, then you can say that its operations is traveling well and use statistics to back that up. If the lead time is less, then most of the time that's a benefit. And therefore, again, that's another way to evaluate or assess whether a business is traveling well in terms of their operations. All right, the second part of operation strategies is to implement a new product or service, design and development. And again, you're looking now here at defining what each of these things are, like quality is, dependability from the performance objectives, but especially telling me and the HSC marker, how is that a strategy? You know, if it's a recommend question, recommend it to me, justify it, tell me why. All right, the third one is supply chain management, which includes logistics, e-commerce, and global sourcing. Now, logistics and supply chain management are not exactly the same. Supply chain management is the heading for all of those things, but logistics is probably the largest part of it. But we'll get into what each of those things are: logistics, supply chain management, e-commerce, global sourcing in future lessons and YouTube clips. And we'll also explain how each of these things can be tinkered with, can be used to be effective strategies to give you that competitive advantage against your rivals. All right, we're getting there. Outsourcing, we know what that is. All right, and we look at the pros and the cons of it, the advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing. Technology is also another strategy of operations, and we've got two main types of technology that can be implemented. Both have their pros and cons, their advantages and disadvantages. There's leading edge, which is newer type of technology that can provide you with that competitive advantage I mentioned earlier, but sometimes a little bit prone to error, expensive capital outlay to purchase leading edge technology. The alternative is established, tried, tested, works well. Much cheaper usually to purchase that machinery, that technology. So there's an advantage there too. All right, the fourth last dot point, inventory management. And here we look at the advantages and disadvantages of holding stock. I don't know why they just don't call that just in case, because they talk about JIT, just in time later. But it's the pros and cons of having lots of stock, JIC, additional stock just in case, or having just enough, which is just in time. And there's benefits for that too. Less warehousing cost, security is reduced, and so on with JIT. Then we look at this benefit, advantage and disadvantages of LIFO, last in, first out, and FIFO, first in, first out. We'll get into that. I'm not going to start on it now because it is tricky. And when we get to that at the end of these YouTube clips, we'll spend some time going through all those four topics or four aspects of the syllabus dot point. All right, we look at quality management, and is an effective strategy for operations. Often a question that you'll want to, or a dot point you'll want to include in your essays. And we look under quality management of quality control, quality assurance, and continual quality improvement, All right, second last one is the overcoming resistance to change. Now that's the strategy. If you can stop people being resistant to change and stop or reduce that inertia and become a driving force rather than a restraining force, then your business can do well in the medium to long term, if not sometimes in the short term. But that's the trick, because it says things like financial costs, such as purchasing new equipment, redundancy payments, reorganizing plant layout. Then do you think, how the hell is that crap strategies? It's not really. But if you can help your staff overcome any resistance, not wanting for those things to happen, then in the long term you will do much better generally. So that short-term pain for long-term gain. I want that in your mind when you look at those dot points. Well, the last one is global factors. And this takes a look at things like global sourcing, economies of scale, scanning and learning, and research and development, and how each of those can be used to be a benefit for a business. Okay guys, see you next lesson.